another important voice coming up as well now. A new drug typically takes about $3 billion and more than a decade to discover and develop. And 90% of experimental medicines fail in the process. AI, though, and machine learning algorithms could slash those costs and timeframes by sorting through and evaluating candidate treatments. Here in the UK, LabGenius is using this technology to develop a new way to search antibodies to help combat diseases. Let's bring in then James Field, founder and CEO of next generation antibody discovery company LabGenius, based here in the UK capital. James, thanks for coming into the studio. Look, a big reason for getting you on is because there is a lot of hype around AI, around ChatGPT, around Google's Bard. There's a lot of money flowing into the sector now. You guys have been working on this for a number of years, and you're in the world of drug discovery. And a lot of guests that come on talk to us about the implications for healthcare. Talk to us about what you do and what you do that's different, what you do that GSK and AstraZeneca and Pfizer are not doing.
Thanks very much for having me on the show. It's an incredible time in the world of drug discovery at the moment. We're transitioning from this world in which to discover new molecules, you had to have an insight into their mechanism to understand the science that underpins that molecule. But the transition that's changing now is to a world in which it's all about how much data you can generate, how you can crunch that data and drive new insight. And LabGenius is all around how do you combine the very best of human and machine intelligence to generate new therapeutic molecules. So what that practically means is that we have a capability that we built out in an old industrial factory here in London that is able to generate a lot of high-quality machine learning grade data. We use that data in conjunction with machine learning to drive novel biological insights around how molecules might work, and then use that to ultimately find novel high-performing molecules.
And so, James, this is, and we had an extended conversation with DeepMind. This is basically, it's almost like what they do, right? Protein folding, and for example, DeepMind then also gives this technology to other companies to advance, right? Some of the research, it would take human 10 years. This takes maybe 2 years. But does it change the way that then it's peer-reviewed? Does it change the way that actually these things then can get to market?
Well, we're really lucky in the sense that from a regulatory perspective, we have the FDA, the EMA, the MHRA, etc. All of those regulatory agencies have a really high bar, and they need to understand how these molecules work, exactly that they're safe, efficacious, etc. And so all of that regulatory infrastructure is already in place. Any of these molecules that come through these processes still have to undergo that rigorous testing.
When it comes to the data question, you touched on this. Are you using, is it your own data? Is it public data? Because there's a lot of scrutiny around this and the ethics of data use.
It's a great question. I think that the most interesting scientific questions are going to be answered by the data that's yet to be generated, the proprietary data sets that ask very specific questions where you can't necessarily access that data on the web. So at LabGenius, we generate biologically relevant, disease-relevant data that's pertinent to very specific diseases. And we use that data to understand how these molecules work. So it's all our own high-quality ML data that we generate.
What can AI used in health and I guess research breakthrough, like how fast can this really solve some of the world's big problems?
Well, what we're seeing through our own work at LabGenius is that we can take problems that would seem intractable and create solutions that as humans you may have even argued against. So really it's a 0 to 1 phenomenon here. And I think the reason that that's so impactful for the world of drug discovery is because, as Tom said at the beginning, 95% of these molecules fail. And if we can alter that probability of success of getting these molecules to approved therapies, then that's going to have a huge societal impact.
Have you had, what breakthroughs have you had or discoveries have you had that you can tell us about now and the pipeline for LabGenius?
Absolutely. So we set up our system and we asked it the question, can we discover a new molecule that is able to differentiate between healthy cells and cancer cells? So we took a clinical benchmark. So that's a molecule that's been made using conventional methods by a pharma company. We ran our ML-driven process, and what we ended up with was a molecule that was 400 times better than that clinical molecule in terms of differentiating between healthy and diseased cells. We're now taking that capability and applying that to a whole number of different potential therapies.
Does that mean that you're also sharing some of the technology? Again, if we go back to AlphaFold and some of, I mean, the idea is that actually you have a big database that everyone can use so that you can peer review it, even if you're using AI. How much sharing is there amongst your industry?
So there's a huge amount of sharing that goes on, but for the work at LabGenius, because of a lot of the value is locked up in this proprietary data that we generate on site, this experimental data, that's where a lot of the value of the company sits. And so it's our ability to generate that data, and that's proprietary in-house.
James, just very briefly before we let you go, the Chancellor of the Exchequer has said he wants to create and turn the UK into a biotech superpower. Is that realistic?
I think the UK is actually really poised to take advantage in this revolution in AI. Take a city like London by way of example. We have incredible expertise in the world of synthetic biology. We've got expertise in machine learning, but also we've got the capital here now to drive a lot of that innovation into really exciting startup companies.
James, thank you so much for joining us. James Fielder, founder and chief executive of LabGenius.